What's up everybody? So today this is a tutorial by Ben Dang and Eric Oyen, and we're going to be showing you how to use layer masks to overlay images on top of each other and use the adjustments that Photoshop has to really make it look like this wasn't a photoshopped image in the first place. So as you can see on the screen, we're going to use these two images on the left, the sort of cityscape on the bottom and the red sky on the top, to make this image on the right, which is sort of a darker nighttime sunset kind of theme that we want to make. So here we go. So the first step is going to be to import your first image into Photoshop. Go to the top menu bar, click select, and then select mask. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a mask around the area of the image that we want to remove or take out, which in this case is going to be the sky and this big pillar on the right side. And if you look on the top left, there should be a plus and minus icon, and you can adjust the size and which parts of the image that you select with that in order to make them more complicated, or just to select different parts of the image that you want to get rid of. So once we have that complete, you're going to go to the bottom right corner of the screen, as you can see, and you're going to click OK. Now in this case we selected the wrong side, so if you click the layer and hold Command I, we'll be able to get the other side of the image to show. Then you add a layer, and you want to make sure it's in the background, so you move it down, and then you add your other image into the Photoshop file. And then we're going to resize that and put that about where we want it. In this case we want it in the background, right where the sky used to be. So once we have that image about where we want in the background, you're going to notice that since we changed the color of the sky, the bottom doesn't really match the color of the reflection. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to adjust that to make it a little more cohesive. So we're going to click the little icon on the bottom right, and there's a bunch of options, but in this case, the first thing we're going to want to do is change the exposure. It's important to remember to click the little square with the arrow tool on the top to make sure you lock the adjustments to the specific layer. Exposure is going to add a layer mask, and it's going to come up with 3 sliders, and the first one we're going to move to the left a little bit to make it a little bit darker because we changed it from day to night. And then we're also going to add another adjustment of hue and saturation, and this will allow us to change that color on the bottom side. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to slide that slider towards the red because we want the bottom to be more red like the sky, and if you wanted it to be more blue, then you'd slide it to the blue. So depending on what you would want to do with your image, you can make adjustments using these different effects and sliders on the top to change the colors or change the lightness and darkness of the image. And then eventually you just want to make it look like an image that wasn't photoshopped in the first place. So there's a bunch of different options that you can use. In this case we're going to only use a couple because already it looks pretty good. The red is much more agreeable with what the top of the image looks like. So the next step would be to just refine our adjustments. We're going to zoom in a little bit here in a sec and just make sure that our layer mask is sort of really touching the edges that we want and not exposing parts of the image that we don't want. So here we go, we're going to zoom in a little bit, make our slider a little smaller, or make the paintbrush a little smaller, and if you can kind of see in the center of the screen right now we have a couple spots that we want to get rid of. So we make sure that the minus section is selected, and we're going to make our mask a little bit smaller in these parts. And as you can see with the image we used, the edges of the buildings were pretty clear and obvious compared to the sky, so the layer mask really wasn't too complicated to make. But there's a couple settings on the right side, such as smooth, feather, contrast, shift edge, that can be played with if you have a harder edge to use with trees or something like that isn't so clear cut like these buildings. So we're going to play with this a little bit till we get it to where we want. We want to make sure that this advertisement or whatever is on the right side is more clear cut. We want to make sure you couldn't tell that there was ever a pillar up in this side of the screen, and then once we're done we're going to click OK. Now we're going to use the brush tool or Command B, and we're going to make sure that the color is on black so that wherever we paint it's going to hide the layer so that we can make it a little more, even more refined than before. And if you can see by this big screen, there's a couple spots that are sticking out, so we're going to paint over that to cover them up and make sure the sky is only showing there. And this just overall makes this image look a little clearer and makes it look like you really put in some work to make this image. So this is the more tedious part of the project, where we want to really make sure that our adjustments are fully made, and we're going to want to, you can see this little spot by this big banner where the old sky is still poking through, so we're going to zoom in a little bit, make sure that's all patched up, make this a little bit smaller so we can get into that little corner there. And you may have to do a lot of this on your image depending on how intricate it is, or your layer mask may totally suffice if it's an easy clear cut shape that you want to cut out. It all depends on what you're trying to really use this skill for with Photoshop. And then we're done. So here we go, we have our final product from our tutorial today. So I encourage you guys to go out and try these tools with the different layers and adjustments that you can use and really make what you want with Photoshop and make it look like Photoshop was never even used. Thank you.